Today, we're going to walk through the workflow for making a stencil with the GCC laser in the Shed Makerspace. So our materials will be a manila file folder like this. My background thing is jamming me up, but it's one of these. You've seen them. They hang in file cabinets. They're great. They're super cheap. They're ubiquitous. They work really well as a spray paint sets. They're also a standard size. And I've tested the laser and I know the laser parameters that work well with them. So we're going to do that. We're going to lay it out in Illustrator. So let's just jump into it. I need to share my screen. Share the whole thing. Here we are. Let's open up Illustrator. You can see some previous examples where I've tested this workflow, and I'm going to make a new file. And I can change its size. So I'm going to create a preset for this, which is the vanilla. Are there, how many L's are in manila? I'm not sure. Its width is 17 3/4, and its height is 11.75. In that orientation, we do need to make sure the color is set to RGB. There are some details of the way that the laser works that define that. And the rest of this I'm not going to get too worried about. So I'm going to create it. And here we have our artboard in Illustrator where we can set this up. I'm going to make a text item. So here on the left ribbon is text, and I'm going to pick the bottom left corner of the page. I'm going to change its size. So in X, I want this to be half of the file folder because they fold in half, right? If we were really slick, we could make one side that does another thing and then have a slightly different color that goes on the other. So you'd have like two. So you'd start with one and then you flip it over and do two, and there'd be a different layer. I will leave that as an exercise for the reader. So here I'm going to set the width, and the width is 17 3/4 inches divided by 2. And the height is the height of the artboard, which is 11 3/4 inches. And that's okay. I'm going to rotate the text 90 degrees. And here it is. I have an enormous font size on here. I'm going to make this like, I don't know, 80 point. Great. I can set the location here. Also drag it around with the selection key, so I can grab this, do that. I don't want to do it that way though, because I want to make sure that the height and width proportions are set. And even then it's all weird. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to move it. So this sets the reference point. I have it right now set in the top left, so I can make X 0, Y 0. That moves it up to the top left. Then I can change the width to be 17 3/4 divided by 2. It's really nice that it'll take that argument. And the height, so it wants to maintain these, and if I change it, it's all weird. What happens if I just make this half of the page? But this should be 11 3/4. Ah, there we go. I can't expand this that way, but it changes the aspect ratio of the text, which is not what I want. So I could then, if I have this in this size, I could move this around by changing this X value. I'm not going to get too worried about it. I am going to change the text though. So I'm going to select the text. I'm going to delete all this text and I'm going to add my stencil text. I'm just going to have it say stencil. So I could move this, right? I know that half of that is 17.75. I'm going to divide it by 2. Really want it to be divided by 4. I want it to be in the center. Cool. I can also do that in Y. So I've chosen the center as the reference point, and my Y can be 11.75 divided by 2. That'll put it in the center of 1/2 of my file folder. I'm going to change my font. I want a stencil font. If I try to cut this out, which I can, I won't get the island in the middle of the E, and I want that. So I'm going to choose a stencil font. So I'm going to highlight the font, and I can change the font family over here in the character. And I happen to have Axios Stencil installed on this. You can install other stencil fonts if you want. Even on the shop computer, it's fine. Doesn't matter. I'm going to make it black. I like a bold stencil. So here we have the stencil font. Strangely, the stencil font will not keep the E island, which isn't what I want. That's not going to work. I don't know why this is labeled stencil font. So let's install another font. You can look at, you can find more, and it will look them up. Takes a second. Great. We can find more. They're all I want is stencil font. There are different kinds of classifications. I'm going to look for one that says stencil. Oh, this is stencil. Oh, that will actually give me a stencil. That's cool. I'm going to pick it. And I need to click the activate, which I believe is this one. Activate these fonts. Yes. Give me those fonts. It's activating. It's taking a minute. It's in the process of activating. No. There we go. Great. So I don't want Axios stencil. I want Anaphora stencil. It's another stencil font, whatever. What other options do we have? Well, Let's go with book. Sure. Looks like a stencil. Great. So now we have a stencil font. All the islands in the E and our letters should come out. That's cool. And our text is highlighted. The way the laser cutter works is it looks for different colors in your file, and then it assigns them cutting parameters. And we're going to get there in a minute. But the important detail here is that the color of these letters is RGB black, and that the stroke is 0.001 points. So the laser cutter has two different modes of cutting, right, and engraving. It can do vector engraving, where it traces a path, which is what we want, and that's why we're going to change the stroke and the fill on this. Or it can do raster, where it scans across. That's really nice if you want to engrave lettering onto something. But if you want to cut out a stencil, that's not going to work. We'd run it a long time. It's a much less efficient way to do it. So we need to make sure that the outline of these is a super thin line, and that there is no infill. So I have it highlighted. I'm going to change the fill to no color. Great. And then I want stroke. And I'm going to make the stroke black. And I'm going to check this with the color mixer and make sure that it is number 000000. So this is, I believe it's hexadecimal, and it is the RGB color code. So you can specify these and then assign cutting parameters to them in the printer. It's printer software, even though it's for the laser cutter and engraver. I'm just going to be calling it the laser cutter from here on out because that's what I call it. It is, in fact, a laser cutter and engraver. Okay, great. So we've done that. It's 00000. Should be 6 of them. We have the stroke. It is the right color. It will look that up. We need to change the stroke thickness to 0.001 points. It will be really faint. There it is. It's super faint. That's what we want. Great. Now I'm going to save this. I'll save it to Creative Cloud, sure. And Manila file folder. Great. Okay, so I've saved this. It's where I want it to be. We've used the transform to move it around. We've set the fill, stroke, and opacity, how opaque it is, to make sure that the laser can look it up. That's going to make more sense in just a moment. We've chosen a stencil font. You can use any stencil font you want. Doesn't matter. And move things around. Looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. Now it is time to print it. So file, print. And this brings up the print menu. Okay, sure. It's upside down. That's okay. Worked just fine. We need to go to setup. And we're going to choose some different printers. So I can choose the S400 RMZ 1.1101, which is the printer that maps to our laser cutter. And sure, we'll put it in portrait. Cool. Color mode is color, and I need to click through to more settings. And this brings me to this custom printer driver that allows me to set the parameters for the laser. So there are options here. I'm going to choose black and white. We could choose the DPI if we wanted. There's all kinds of transforms we could do. We don't need to do that, but we do need to look on the pens. And the pens are where it looks up the colors. These are RGB color codes. And you tell the laser what laser parameters to use for each of these colors. So ours is in black. You could set up a path so that there were engraving that happened in black and cutting that happened in red. You could do a test print, where you set a bunch of different parameters and assigned them to these different colors. This is a first pass tutorial, so we're just going to cut. Which is why we set the stroke and had no fill. And I know that black, color code 000000, RGB black is the one that we want, but I don't know what speed and power to use. But I did make a reference. So there is a QR code on the laser. And it points to this website, which is the guide for the GCC laser. This might change, but for right now, this is what we're using. Anyway, on here, there are a bunch of choices. So there's material safety data sheets. There's a guide that will step you through this process if you don't want to listen to me talk through this video. There are manufacturer's manuals, there's maintenance stuff, there's all kinds of good stuff on here. But the thing we want is the speed and power settings. So open that up. This points you to a spreadsheet that will give you the power settings that I have, speed and power settings that I have found empirically for all of these different materials. It turns out that all of the commercial lasers that you're going to run into have slightly different feed rates and different power ratings. And so for most lasers, unless you happen to buy the same one as someone else who has conveniently posted their speed and power settings on the internet, you go through and you test all of these and see what works and what doesn't. So I've gone through here and aha, here we go. Cardstock. I tested it with a manila file folder. We are not etching because etching won't do us any good for a stencil, but we are cutting. So we want to run at 35% speed and 100% power. And that'll cut our stencil outline. Okay, cool. So I have that information. You don't need multiple passes. 35% speed, 100% power. I'll come back to my printer settings. 35% speed, 100% power. I'm going to uncheck raster because we're not rastering. We're only doing vector cutting. And we do want air assist, yeah. And we'll hit OK. And then you hit print, it sends it to the printer. I'm making this video from home and I don't have the printer with me. So we're going to add that later on, or you may want to take a look at the guide on the website that the QR code on the machine points to. I'm going to hit print and then it won't do anything. There you have it. There will be more, but enjoy this snippet of the guide.